My name is Lonnie Barnes, 68 years old, from Boston. 6 months ago, my wife Martha lost her battle with cancer after 42 wonderful years together. My son Jeffrey convinced me that moving to our old family estate in the countryside would help me heal. I believed him. I trusted him. Then he left me there. No internet, no neighbors, no transportation, just silence and memories. I was completely alone until I opened that locked closet and screamed at what I found inside. If you're watching this video, let me know where you're viewing from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to discover what was hiding in that closet all these years. Martha and I met during our sophomore year at university. She was studying literature while I pursued history. We got married right after graduation and built a life in Boston. I became a high school history teacher, and Martha worked as a librarian. We saved for retirement, bought a modest home in a nice neighborhood, and raised our son Jeffrey to value education and family. Martha was the love of my life. She had this incredible ability to see the best in people. Even on my worst days, when difficult students or administrative politics had me questioning my career choice, she would remind me of the difference I was making. She was my rock, my conscience, my best friend. The diagnosis came without warning. What we thought was persistent heartburn turned out to be stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 4. Those final months were a blur of hospital visits, medication schedules, and watching the strongest person I knew slowly fade away. During her last week, when lucidity came in brief windows between morphine doses, she made me promise something. "Lonnie," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "promise me you will stay connected to family. Don't isolate yourself when I am gone. Jeffrey will need you as much as you need him." I promised her, holding her frail hand, tears streaming down my weathered face. I had no idea how difficult keeping that promise would become. After the funeral, I tried to adjust to life without Martha. Our house, once warm and full of laughter, felt like a museum of memories. I would find myself talking to her empty chair at dinner, or reaching for her in bed at night. The grief counselor said this was normal, but it felt like I was losing my mind. Jeffrey visited during the first few weeks. He would bring groceries, help with household tasks, and sit with me watching baseball games neither of us cared about, but I could see the strain in his eyes. At 43, Jeffrey was deep into his corporate career. The frequent 2-hour drives from his home to mine were taking a toll. His wife Amanda called less frequently than he did. When she visited, her discomfort was palpable. She would glance at her watch, make excuses about appointments, and nudge Jeffrey toward the door. I overheard them arguing on the porch one evening. "We cannot keep doing this every weekend," Amanda hissed. "Your father needs professional help or assisted living. This is consuming our lives." "He just lost Mom," Jeffrey replied, but his protest sounded half-hearted. 2 months after Martha passed, Jeffrey arrived alone. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, a strange enthusiasm in his expression that I hadn't seen since Martha fell ill. "Dad, I have been thinking about what might help you process your grief," he began, sliding a folder across the table. "Remember the old family estate in western Massachusetts? The one Grandpa left us?" I nodded. The property had been in our family for generations, though neither of us had visited in at least 15 years. It sat on 20 acres about 3 hours from Boston. "I think you should consider moving there," Jeffrey continued. "The fresh air, the peace and quiet. It would be therapeutic. No memories of Mom around every corner. A chance for a fresh start." I was skeptical. That place must be falling apart by now. "I had a property manager check it out. It needs some work, but it is livable. The important systems are functioning." He opened the folder to show photos of the old Victorian house surrounded by overgrown gardens and tall trees. "Think about it, Dad. No city noise, beautiful scenery, a simpler life." "I don't know, Jeffrey. It is pretty isolated out there. That is the point. No distractions, just time to heal." His enthusiasm seemed genuine. "Plus, it is only a 3-hour drive from me. I can visit regularly, maybe every other weekend. We can fix the place up together. The idea began to take root. Maybe a change of scenery would help. The house in Boston did feel haunted by Martha's absence. Perhaps Jeffrey was right. Perhaps this was what Martha meant about staying connected. "I will help you pack," Jeffrey said, taking my tentative nod as agreement. "We can drive out this weekend." The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and preparations. Jeffrey seemed rejuvenated by the project, talking about hiking trails and local farms near the estate. I started to feel hopeful for the first time since Martha died. This could be good for both of us. We loaded my belongings into Jeffrey's SUV on Saturday morning. I took one last look at the home Martha and I had shared for 30 years before closing the door. Jeffrey promised to handle the sale of the house and said the proceeds would help support me. The drive was pleasant, with Jeffrey playing old jazz music that Martha and I used to dance to in our living room. We stopped for lunch at a roadside diner, where Jeffrey continued painting an idyllic picture of countryside living. "The nearest town is small but has everything you need," he explained between bites of his burger. "General store, post office, a couple of restaurants. Simple living, Dad. No traffic, no noise pollution, no nosy neighbors." When we finally turned onto the long gravel driveway leading to the estate, I felt a mixture of nostalgia and apprehension. The house looked older than in the photos, its white paint peeling, the wraparound porch sagging slightly on one side. The surrounding property was beautiful but wild, nature reclaiming what humans had once tamed. Jeffrey helped carry my bags inside. The interior was musty but intact. Sheets covered most of the furniture, which appeared to be the same pieces from my childhood visits. Jeffrey showed me around, pointing out the kitchen with its ancient appliances, the living room with a stone fireplace, and a bedroom on the first floor that he suggested I use. "The stairs might be tough on your knees," he said, and I appreciated the thoughtfulness. We spent the afternoon removing sheets, dusting surfaces, and making the place minimally habitable. Jeffrey went into town and returned with some basic groceries and supplies. He showed me how to operate the well pump, the circuit breaker, and the ancient heating system. "The landline should work," he said, "but cell reception is spotty. I will make sure to call the landline to check on you." As evening approached, I expected Jeffrey to unpack his own bag, but he never brought one in from the car. "You are not staying?" I asked, trying to mask my disappointment. "I cannot tonight, Dad. I have an early meeting tomorrow. But I will be back next weekend, I promise. We will start working on the garden then." Before I could fully process what was happening, Jeffrey was hugging me goodbye. His embrace felt rushed, perfunctory. "Get settled in. Enjoy the quiet. This is going to be good for you, Dad. A healing place." I stood on the porch and watched his taillights disappear down the gravel drive, suddenly feeling very alone. The forest around the house seemed to close in, and the setting sun cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn. For the first time, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, but I pushed the thought away. Jeffrey would be back next weekend. This was a new beginning, a chance to heal. Martha would have wanted me to try. As darkness fell completely, I went inside and locked the door behind me, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the old house, settling for the night. The first morning at the estate, I woke disoriented. Sunlight streamed through curtainless windows, illuminating dancing dust particles. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then reality crashed back. Martha was gone. I was alone in my family's ancestral home, miles from everything familiar. I decided to properly explore the property in daylight. The house was larger than I remembered from childhood visits. 5 bedrooms upstairs, though I planned to stick with the first-floor room Jeffrey had prepared. The kitchen had appliances from the 1970s, but they functioned. The living room featured heavy wooden furniture draped in sheets. 2 bathrooms, both with temperamental plumbing. A study filled with mildewed books. Outside was 20 acres of neglected land. An overgrown orchard of apple and pear trees. A collapsed shed. A stone well that mirrored the one connected to the house's water system. Beautiful landscape, certainly, but overwhelming for a 68-year-old man alone. My first priority was to check the communication situation. The landline had a dial tone, which was reassuring. I tried calling Jeffrey to let him know I had settled in, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a message expressing my hope that he had made it home safely. Next, I checked my cell phone. As Jeffrey warned, the signal fluctuated between one wavering bar and no service. The phone was essentially useless. "No problem," I muttered to myself. "Jeffrey said the landline works, and he will be back this weekend." I decided to venture into town for additional supplies. That was when I discovered the next challenge. According to the property map I found in the study, the nearest town was 8 miles away. Without a car, that meant a very long walk. I considered calling a taxi but realized I had no idea if such services even existed in this rural area. With no internet access, I could not look it up. The landline phone book was from 2007. Left with no immediate alternative, I decided to walk to the main road to see if any neighbors might be within reasonable distance. The driveway alone was nearly a mile long. When I reached the paved road, I discovered what Jeffrey had conveniently omitted. There were no nearby houses, just forest, occasional fields, and empty roads stretching in both directions. I walked for another 30 minutes and found nothing but more rural landscape. Exhausted and dismayed, I returned to the estate. The supplies Jeffrey had purchased would last a week at most. I would need to figure out transportation before then. Back at the house, I tried calling Jeffrey again. Voicemail. I left another message, this one more urgent, explaining my transportation dilemma. I tried not to sound accusatory, but panic was setting in. That evening, I made a simple dinner from the supplies and sat alone at the large kitchen table. The house creaked and settled around me. Occasional noises from the surrounding forest made me jump. I had never considered myself easily frightened, but the isolation was already affecting me. I pulled out the photo of Martha I had packed. It was taken on our 40th anniversary trip to Cape Cod. She was laughing, her silver hair blowing in the ocean breeze, eyes crinkled with joy. "What am I doing here, Martha?" I whispered to the photo. There was no answer but the sound of wind through the trees outside. The next day, I gathered my courage and began the long walk to town. 8 miles took me nearly 3 hours. By the time I reached the small main street of Millfield, I was exhausted, and my knees ached terribly. The town was even smaller than Jeffrey had described. One general store, a post office, a diner, and a handful of other businesses. No public transportation, no taxi service. The general store owner, a man named Tom, looked at me with curiosity when I explained my situation. "The old Barnes place?" he said, recognition dawning. "That is a fair piece out. You walked all that way?" When I confirmed I had, he shook his head. "No car out there? That is a mighty tough spot for a man your age." I purchased what I could carry. Tom offered to drive me back, but his shop was the only one for miles, and he could not leave it unattended. I thanked him and began the long walk home, my bags cutting into my fingers, my legs protesting every step. By the time I reached the estate, darkness was falling. I was physically depleted and emotionally drained. I tried Jeffrey again. This time, miraculously, he answered. "Dad, sorry I missed your calls. Work has been crazy." "Jeffrey, there is a problem," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have no transportation here. The nearest town is 8 miles away. There are no neighbors, no taxis, nothing." A pause. "I thought I mentioned that. It is pretty rural." "Rural is one thing. This is isolation. I cannot live like this without a vehicle." "Dad, the whole point was to simplify, remember? Get away from everything." "I need some way to get supplies, Jeffrey. I just walked 16 miles round trip today. At my age, that is not sustainable." Another pause. "I will figure something out. Maybe we can find a used car for you next weekend when I visit." That calmed me somewhat. "So you are still coming this weekend?" "About that." Jeffrey's voice took on the tone I recognized from childhood when he was about to disappoint me. I might need to push it back a week. Amanda's parents are visiting unexpectedly. My heart sank. I see. It is just one more week, Dad. Get some rest. Enjoy the peace and quiet. That is why you are there, remember? After we hung up, I sat on the porch staring into the darkness. Martha's photo clutched in my hand. The truth was becoming painfully clear. This move was not about my healing. It was about removing the burden of my grief from Jeffrey's busy life. The next few days established a bleak routine. I rationed the food carefully. I explored the house room by room, finding little of interest beyond decades-old family items. I tried the television, but there was no cable or antenna connection. I found an old radio that picked up one staticky station playing music that went out of fashion before Jeffrey was born. On the 5th day, I discovered that the water from the taps had taken on a brownish tint and a metallic smell. The well pump was failing. I tried calling Jeffrey several times, leaving increasingly urgent messages. He did not return my calls. On the 6th day, with supplies dwindling and the water situation worsening, I made another grueling trip to town. This time, I swallowed my pride and explained my situation to Tom at the general store more completely. Your son just left you out there? No car? No nothing? Tom's weathered face creased with concern. He is coming next weekend, I said, not entirely believing it myself. He has been busy. Tom shook his head. That is not right. Look, I cannot leave the store, but my nephew does deliveries for elderly folks around here. I will talk to him about adding you to his route. It will cost a bit extra for the distance, but at least you would not have to make this walk. I thanked him profusely and purchased what I could carry. The walk back was even harder than before. My legs trembled with each step, and I had to stop frequently to rest. That night, trying to conserve the flashlight batteries as the power flickered during a mild storm, I faced the harsh reality of my situation. My son had effectively abandoned me in the countryside with minimal resources and support. The estate was not a healing retreat, it was exile. When the weekend came and went with no Jeffrey, I was not surprised. His text message cited a work emergency. The next weekend brought another excuse. Then another. A full month passed. Tom's nephew Bradley began delivering basic supplies weekly, charging a hefty fee that quickly depleted the cash Jeffrey had left me. The water issue partially resolved itself after a heavy rain, but I boiled it to be safe. I tried calling our old neighbor in Boston to ask about the house sale, but she informed me that there was no for sale sign, no realtor activity that she had noticed. Another lie exposed. The final confirmation of my abandonment came when I called Jeffrey on my birthday. He answered, sounding rushed as usual. Dad, can I call you back? I am headed into a meeting. It is my birthday, I said quietly. A long pause. Right. Happy birthday. Look, I will make it up to you when I visit. When will that be, Jeffrey? It has been a month. Soon. Things are just hectic right now. His voice took on an annoyed edge. This was supposed to help you become more independent, remember? You spent your whole life in Boston. This is your chance to experience something different. After he hung up, I sat on the porch watching the sunset, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. Martha would have been heartbroken to see what had become of our family. Our son had discarded me like an inconvenient burden. The weather turned colder as October arrived. The long walks to town became more treacherous. During one return journey, carrying bags of groceries I could barely afford, I slipped on wet leaves and fell hard. Nothing broke, but I sprained my ankle badly. The 3-mile crawl back to the house was the lowest point of my life. As I lay in bed that night, ankle throbbing, house creaking in the wind, I wondered if this was how I would die. Alone, forgotten, in a decaying house that held no joy for me. Maybe that was what Jeffrey intended all along. November arrived with bitter winds and the first dusting of snow. My sprained ankle healed slowly, but the limp remained. Bradley, Tom's nephew, continued his weekly deliveries, but the fees consumed most of my remaining cash. The monthly Social Security checks were being direct deposited into my account in Boston, inaccessible without transportation to a bank. The physical toll of rural isolation mounted daily. Simple tasks became monumental challenges. Chopping firewood for the fireplace left me exhausted and sore. The house was drafty, heat escaping through poorly sealed windows and doors. I took to wearing layers of clothing indoors and sleeping under every blanket I could find. My diet deteriorated to canned goods and non-perishables. Fresh fruits and vegetables became rare luxuries. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loose on my frame. The mirror reflected a gaunt face I barely recognized. When had I aged so dramatically? My hair seemed whiter, my wrinkles deeper. The psychological impact was even worse than the physical. Loneliness became my constant companion. I found myself talking aloud to Martha's photo throughout the day, detailed one-sided conversations about my circumstances, my feelings, my growing resentment toward Jeffrey. He always was stubborn, just like his grandfather, I told her image one evening. Remember how he would lock himself in his room when he did not get his way? I guess some things never change. The silence following these conversations grew more deafening each day. Sometimes I imagined I heard Martha's voice responding, a hallucination born of desperation for human connection. I tried calling Jeffrey at least twice weekly. Most calls went unanswered. When he did pick up, our conversations followed a predictable pattern. He would sound rushed and distracted. I would explain some problem with the house or my situation. He would promise to address it soon. The call would end with another broken promise to visit. One particularly difficult evening in mid-November, after the power had been out for 6 hours during a snowstorm, Jeffrey finally answered my call. "Dad, this is not a good time," he said immediately. "The power is out," I said, my voice shaking from cold. "The temperature in the house is below 50 degrees. I cannot stay here like this." He sighed audibly. "The power goes out in storms. It will come back on. Jeffrey, I am freezing. The fireplace smoke is backing up because something is wrong with the chimney. I cannot heat the house. Put on more layers. Use extra blankets." His cavalier response ignited something in me. "Your mother would be ashamed of how you are treating me." A long silence followed. Then Jeffrey's voice turned cold. "That is unfair. I am trying to run a business and support my family while you complain about minor inconveniences. Mom would understand priorities." "Priorities? I am your father. I taught you to ride a bike. I helped you with your homework. I paid for your college education, and I am grateful. But I cannot drop everything every time you face a challenge." This was supposed to make you more self-sufficient. The conversation deteriorated further. By the end, Jeffrey was shouting that I was manipulative and ungrateful for the opportunity he had provided. I was in tears, something that had not happened since Martha's funeral. The power returned the next morning, but something inside me had broken. The thin thread of hope that Jeffrey would have a change of heart snapped completely. I was truly on my own. As November turned to December, my trips to town became impossible due to snow and ice. Bradley's deliveries became my lifeline, though he often had to park at the main road and trudge the mile-long driveway with supplies. His rates increased again due to the difficulty. My birthday came and went without acknowledgement from Jeffrey. I spent the day staring at old family photos, tracking the progression from Jeffrey's childhood to adulthood, searching for signs of when my son had become capable of such callousness. Christmas approached. The thought of spending the holiday alone was unbearable. I tried calling Jeffrey again, swallowing my pride. "I was wondering if perhaps I could visit you for Christmas," I suggested hesitantly. "Just for a day or two, Bradley could probably drive me to the bus station in North Adams." Jeffrey cleared his throat. "We are actually going to be at Amanda's parents' this year, in Florida." "I see." I struggled to keep my voice even. "When did you decide this?" "Months ago. I thought I mentioned it." He had not. Another lie to add to the growing collection. "Maybe after the new year then," I suggested. "Let me check our schedule and get back to you," he replied, a response I now recognized as permanent deferral. The holidays passed in a blur of loneliness. I did not bother decorating or acknowledging Christmas Day. What was the point? The only gift I received was a text message from Jeffrey, a generic Merry Christmas that he had probably sent to everyone in his contacts. January brought the harshest weather yet. A major snowstorm dropped over 2 feet of snow, completely isolating the estate for days. Bradley could not make deliveries. I rationed my remaining food carefully, 1 small meal per day. During this period of forced confinement, my mental state deteriorated rapidly. I spent hours staring out windows at the endless white landscape. I had imaginary conversations not just with Martha now, but with my long-dead parents, with former colleagues, with the furniture. I laughed at jokes no one told and cried about comments no one made. One particularly bad night, I found myself considering whether Jeffrey would even notice or care if I died here. Would spring arrive, snow melt, and reveal my body to whoever eventually checked on the property? Would he feel guilty then? The morbid thoughts frightened me enough to spark a momentary return to rationality. I needed to do something, anything, to change my circumstances before I lost myself completely. As January limped toward February, I began systematically exploring parts of the house I had previously ignored. The 3rd-floor attic, accessible via a steep, narrow staircase that my knees protested climbing. The root cellar beneath the kitchen, damp and musty but stocked with ancient preserved goods. I was not desperate enough to try yet. I searched for anything that might help me survive or escape my situation. Old tools, forgotten cash, anything of value I could potentially trade for transportation. The exploration served another purpose. It kept my mind occupied, gave each day a purpose beyond mere survival. I began to document my discoveries in a journal I found in the study, a way of maintaining my sanity through structure and routine. By mid-February, I had explored most of the house except for one area, a locked closet in the back bedroom on the 2nd floor. The door was solid oak with an old-fashioned keyhole. I had noticed it during my initial exploration, but had no key and no particular interest at the time. Now, with nothing else to investigate, this locked door became my obsession. What might be inside? Family valuables? Documents? At the very least, it was a mystery to solve, a distraction from the grinding loneliness. I spent days looking for the key, searching every drawer, every other closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing. I tried fashioning makeshift lockpicks from paper clips, a skill I vaguely remembered from my youth, but succeeded only in hurting my fingers. In desperation, I took a screwdriver and hammer from the kitchen and began working on the hinges. The old wood resisted, and my weak arms made progress painfully slow. For 3 days, I worked on the door for hours, resting frequently as my strength gave out. On the 4th day, as a February snowstorm howled outside, I finally broke through. The door came loose with a groan of protesting wood, nearly falling on me in the process. Breathing heavily from exertion, heart pounding with anticipation, I pointed my flashlight into the revealed space, and then I screamed, not in terror, but in shock and overwhelming emotion. The closet was not filled with forgotten junk or worthless mementos. It was a carefully organized time capsule of love. My hands trembled as I reached for the first item in the closet. A leather-bound journal with Martha's elegant handwriting on the cover. For Lonnie, when I am gone. I sank to the floor, legs no longer able to support me, and opened to the first page. My dearest Lonnie, she had written. If you are reading this, then I am no longer with you in body, though I hope my love surrounds you still. This journal is the first of many I have prepared for you, knowing that one day you would need guidance in a world without me beside you. Tears blurred my vision as I flipped through pages filled with her thoughts, memories of our life together, and practical advice for navigating widowhood. She had dated the entries, the most recent just weeks before her diagnosis. She had been preparing for her absence long before either of us knew it was imminent. The closet contained far more than just the journal. Cardboard boxes neatly labeled in Martha's handwriting lined the shelves. Photos 1980s. Jeffrey's childhood. Our travels. Another section held financial documents in sealed envelopes. Insurance policies, property deeds, investment accounts. Most surprising was a sealed envelope marked Jeffrey's true nature. With shaking hands, I opened it and began reading a letter Martha had written 6 months before her diagnosis. Lonnie, my love, what I am about to share will pain you deeply, but you must know the truth about our son. Jeffrey has been systematically draining our retirement accounts to cover his gambling debts and failed investments. He has forged your signature on loan documents. He has mortgaged properties you do not even know we own. I discovered this by accident 3 years ago and have been quietly working to protect what remains of our assets. I confronted him once. He swore he would stop and repay everything. He has not. Instead, he has become more secretive, more manipulative. I fear that when I am gone, he will take advantage of your grief and trusting nature. That is why I have created this sanctuary of truth. Everything you need is here. I sat in stunned silence, the letter clutched in my trembling hands. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Not only had Jeffrey abandoned me, but he had been stealing from us for years. Martha had known and carried this burden alone to protect me. Further exploration of the closet revealed more shocking discoveries. Martha had created a hidden bank account in my name, at a small local bank in Millfield, the very town I had been walking to for supplies. The account contained a substantial sum, the proceeds from selling some family jewelry and stocks Martha had inherited from her parents. There were detailed maps of the estate with notes about resources I had overlooked. The old well behind the house was connected to a separate water system that could be activated if the main one failed. There was a generator in a hidden compartment of the tool shed, a collection of heirloom seeds for planting a survival garden. But the most unexpected discovery was at the back of the closet, an old ham radio set, complete with instruction manuals and a solar-powered battery system. Martha's note explained that her father had been an amateur radio enthusiast and had installed this system during the Cold War. She had maintained it secretly over the years, replacing parts and updating components. "Communications are essential, my love," she had written. "This radio will connect you to the outside world when all else fails. Learn to use it. There is a community of good people out there who will help you if you reach out." I carried the radio set downstairs with reverent care, setting it up in the study according to the detailed instructions Martha had provided. The manuals were highlighted and annotated in her neat handwriting, simplifying the complex technical jargon. For 3 days, I immersed myself in learning how to operate the radio. I read the manuals cover to cover, practiced the protocols, memorized the frequencies. On the 4th day, with hands still unsteady from emotion and age, I made my first transmission. "CQ, CQ, this island." I hesitated, then used the call sign Martha had registered decades ago. "This is WB1ARB, calling CQ." Static answered me. I tried again, repeating the call several times before a crackled voice responded. "WB1ARB, this is KC1, FDM. I read you. Over." The sound of another human voice nearly undid me. I choked back a sob before responding, explaining that I was new to ham radio and transmitting from the old Barnes estate outside Millfield. "Barnes estate?" the voice replied. "That old Victorian on County Road 7? I am Alan Robertson. I live about 20 miles from you. Been wondering if anyone was living there again. Saw smoke from the chimney when I drove by last month." Alan became my first friend in this isolated new life. A retired electrical engineer in his 70s, he had been operating ham radios since childhood. We spoke daily, his friendly voice a lifeline pulling me back from the edge of despair. When I explained my situation, the abandonment by Jeffrey and my transportation problems, Alan's response was immediate and emphatic. "That is no way to treat family. Give me 2 days to rearrange some appointments, and I will drive out to meet you in person. We will get this sorted." True to his word, Alan arrived at the estate 48 hours later. Seeing another human being on my doorstep after months of isolation was overwhelming. I surprised both of us by embracing him like a long-lost brother, tears streaming down my face. Alan took me into town that very day. With Martha's documentation, I accessed the hidden bank account she had established. The balance was substantial, more than enough to address my immediate needs and develop a long-term plan. We purchased a used but reliable pickup truck from a dealer in North Adams. Alan helped me secure a post office box in town so I could change my mailing address for Social Security and other important communications. We bought a prepaid cell phone with a signal booster that would work at the estate. "Your wife was one remarkable woman," Alan commented as we drove back to the estate, my truck following his. "She saw all this coming and prepared for it meticulously. She always could read people better than I could," I replied, my heart full of gratitude and renewed love for Martha. I never saw Jeffrey's true nature. She did. The next week transformed my existence. With Alan's help, I had the estate's electrical system upgraded, installed a satellite internet connection, and contracted local workers to repair the most pressing structural issues with the house. Martha's hidden funds made all this possible. Using the restored internet access, I researched my legal options regarding Jeffrey's financial exploitation. Martha had documented everything meticulously, including copies of forged documents and bank statements showing unauthorized transfers. I contacted an elder law attorney in Boston who specialized in cases of family financial abuse. Most importantly, I followed Martha's detailed plans for making the estate self-sufficient. Her journals included extensive notes on gardening in the local climate, which wild plants were edible, how to preserve food for winter. She had even included architectural drawings for adding solar panels to the south-facing roof. She knew I would end up here eventually, I told Alan one evening as we reviewed Martha's plans. Not just because Jeffrey might abandon me here, but because this place was always special to our family. She was preparing it as a sanctuary, not a prison. With each passing day, following Martha's guidance and supported by my new friend Alan, the estate began to transform from a place of isolation and despair to one of possibility and independence. The property that Jeffrey had intended as my exile was becoming my salvation. When the attorney confirmed that I had a strong case against Jeffrey for elder financial abuse and fraud, I felt no triumph, only sadness for what our relationship had become. But Martha's final gift was not just material resources or practical guidance. It was the strength to face hard truths and the courage to reclaim my life from those who would diminish it. By early March, with the first hints of spring thawing the winter landscape, I stood on the porch of the estate watching sunrise paint the snow-covered fields gold. For the first time since Martha's death, I felt something like peace. She had not abandoned me. She had been preparing this path forward all along, knowing I would need it. "Thank you, my love," I whispered to the morning air. "I hear you." The discovery of Martha's preparations sparked a profound emotional transformation. The first night after finding the closet, I wept until no tears remained, clutching her journals to my chest like precious artifacts. It was grief mixed with gratitude, betrayal tempered by the knowledge that Martha had never stopped loving and protecting me, even beyond death. As March progressed, I established a new daily routine centered around the ham radio. Each morning after breakfast, I would make contact with Alan and other operators in the regional network. The community welcomed me with unexpected warmth. Most were retirees like myself. Many were veterans or former emergency service workers who understood the value of communication and community support. Doris, a retired nurse from Vermont, offered medical advice when I mentioned joint pain from the cold. Walter, an ex-forest ranger in New Hampshire, provided detailed guidance on identifying edible plants on my property. The radio became my classroom, social club, and support group all in one. Alan visited weekly, usually bringing specialized supplies I could not easily obtain in Millfield. His friendship proved invaluable as I navigated the practical aspects of rural living. He helped me set up a rainwater collection system to supplement the well and taught me basic maintenance for my truck. "You are catching on quick for a city boy," he joked one afternoon, as we installed a small greenhouse using materials salvaged from the collapsed shed. "I was not always urban," I replied. "My grandfather taught me some basics when I visited here as a child. The knowledge was dormant, not gone. With reliable transportation and internet access, I could finally address my financial situation properly. The elder law attorney, Miss Reynolds, helped me secure a court order to freeze any assets Jeffrey might still try to access. She also helped me redirect my Social Security payments to my new local bank account. Martha's hidden account provided enough funds to make critical improvements to the estate. I hired local contractors to repair the roof, replace broken windows, and install proper insulation. The difference in heating costs was immediate and substantial. Tom from the general store became a valuable ally once he realized I was committed to staying in the area. He introduced me to local farmers who sold meat and produce at better prices than his shop could offer. He also connected me with a retired handyman named Carl, who was willing to barter services for items from the estate I no longer needed. "That old dining set is worth something to the right buyer," Carl told me after helping install a new water heater. "My daughter runs an antique shop in Williamstown. She would give you fair value." Through these connections, I began selectively selling furniture and items from the estate that held no sentimental value. The proceeds funded further improvements and built my emergency reserve. Following Martha's detailed gardening journals, I prepared the ground for spring planting as soon as the soil could be worked. Her notes were specific to the microclimate of our property, detailing which areas got the best sun exposure, which soil types supported different crops, and how to maximize yields in the short New England growing season. "Your wife was quite the botanist," Alan remarked as he helped me till a garden plot. "These notes could be published in a gardening journal. She grew up on a farm in western Connecticut," I explained. "Her parents were practical people who believed in self-sufficiency. She never lost those skills." By mid-April, the estate was beginning to reflect my renewed purpose. The exterior remained rustic, but the interior was increasingly comfortable and functional. Solar panels installed on the south-facing roof reduced electricity costs. The greenhouse contained seedlings started from Martha's heirloom seed collection. The ham radio station in the study had expanded to include weather monitoring equipment. Most importantly, I was changing. The physical work strengthened my body after months of deterioration. Regular social contact through the radio network and in-person visits from Alan improved my mental health dramatically. I was sleeping better, eating properly again, finding joy in daily activities. One warm afternoon while working in the garden, I had a realization. For the first time since Martha's death, I had gone an entire day without talking to her photo. Not because I loved or missed her any less, but because I was engaging with life again, just as she would have wanted. That evening, I opened a special bottle of wine I had been saving and raised a glass to her memory. "You knew, did not you?" I said aloud. "You knew that I would need to rebuild my life without you, and you gave me the blueprint. You were always the visionary one." A peaceful acceptance settled over me. Martha was gone physically, but her love and wisdom remained in every journal entry, every carefully preserved seed, every detail of the sanctuary she had prepared. The following week brought an unexpected development. While reorganizing the study, I discovered another sealed envelope from Martha tucked inside an old family Bible. This one was dated just 2 weeks before her death. "My dearest Lonnie," she had written in handwriting shakier than her earlier notes. "By now you have likely discovered the resources I prepared for you at the estate. There is one final matter I need to address. The property itself. Jeffrey may have told you that the estate was left to both of you by your grandfather. This is not entirely accurate. While the property was initially in both your names, we restructured the ownership after I discovered Jeffrey's financial improprieties. The estate is now solely in your name, with all taxes paid for 5 years forward. I did this not to punish our son, but to protect you. Jeffrey has significant debts I have not fully documented. Had the property remained partially his creditors could potentially force a sale. This legal change was made with the help of our friend Richard Stanley, whose contact information is enclosed. The deed is in the floor, safe in the main bedroom. Combination 184263. Forgive me for the secrecy, but I needed to ensure you would have this sanctuary when you needed it most. I love you eternally, Martha. The revelation stunned me. The estate was entirely mine. Jeffrey had no legal claim to it whatsoever. His abandonment of me here was not just cruel, but fundamentally dishonest. He had led me to believe he was generously allowing me to use family property, when in fact it belonged solely to me. I called Miss Reynolds immediately to verify the information. She confirmed that the deed in the floor safe was legitimate and properly registered. The estate and surrounding 20 acres were mine alone. That night, I sat on the porch, watching fireflies emerge in the twilight, contemplating this new information. I should have felt angry at Jeffrey's deception, but instead I felt something unexpected: empowerment. The knowledge clarified my position and my options moving forward. The next morning, I called Alan on the ham radio with a proposition. I want to do something more with this place, I explained. It is too large for just me, and Martha clearly intended it as more than just a private residence. What would you think about turning part of it into a retreat center? For seniors who need temporary sanctuary or veterans transitioning back to civilian life. Alan's enthusiasm matched my own. Lonnie, that is brilliant. The property is perfect for that. Peaceful, private, but not too remote now that you have upgraded everything. I know several veterans organizations that might be interested in partnering on something like that. Over the next 2 weeks, the idea took concrete shape. I would maintain the main house as my residence, but convert the second floor into guest rooms. The old carriage house could be renovated into a communal space for classes and meetings. The abundant land offered possibilities for therapeutic gardening programs and nature walks. Alan introduced me to local veterans groups and senior service organizations. Many expressed interest in the concept, offering suggestions and potential resources. A retired architect in the ham radio community volunteered to draw up preliminary renovation plans at no charge. As April turned to May, my life had transformed completely from the desperate isolation of winter. I had purpose, community, and resources. I was implementing Martha's vision for the property, while adding my own aspirations to the blueprint. The estate was becoming not just a place of personal healing, but a resource for others seeking the same. Then, without warning, Jeffrey's SUV appeared in the driveway one sunny afternoon in mid-May. He had not called ahead, had not responded to my messages in over 2 months, had simply shown up unannounced, as if he had every right to be there. I watched from the porch as he parked and approached, noting his shocked expression as he took in the improvements to the property. Solar panels on the roof, new windows, a thriving greenhouse. My truck parked beside the house. These were not the signs of abandonment and decline he had likely expected to find. For the first time since Martha's death, I felt ready to confront my son not from a place of weakness and need, but from a position of clarity and strength. The confrontation I had dreaded for months now seemed not just inevitable, but necessary for my continued healing. I stood tall as Jeffrey climbed the porch steps, his expression a mixture of confusion and calculation. The time for reckoning had arrived. Jeffrey stood awkwardly on the porch, clearly thrown by the transformed appearance of the estate and my own improved condition. Gone was the frail, grieving father he had deposited here 6 months ago. In his place stood a man with purpose in his eyes and firmness in his posture. "Dad," he said finally, "you look different." "6 months will do that," I replied evenly. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" The interior of the house shocked him even more than the exterior improvements. The musty, neglected rooms had been replaced by clean, well-organized living spaces. New curtains brightened the windows. The kitchen featured updated appliances. The study had been transformed into a communications center with the ham radio, computer, and weather monitoring equipment. "How did you?" Jeffrey began, then stopped, recalibrating. "The place looks good. Thank you. I have been busy." I poured coffee into mugs Martha had hand-painted years ago. What brings you here after all this time? Jeffrey shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to check on you, see how you were doing. After 6 months of broken promises and ignored calls, he flinched at my directness. Work has been incredibly demanding, and Amanda's father had health issues we were dealing with. I see. I kept my tone neutral. Yet you found time to visit Florida for Christmas. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by defensiveness. You seem to be doing fine without my help. Better than fine, actually. Where did you get the money for all this? You were barely managing in Boston, and there it was. The real reason for his visit, wrapped in a thin veneer of concern. Your mother was an extraordinary planner, I said simply. She left resources for me that you did not know about. Jeffrey paled slightly. What kind of resources? Financial accounts, legal documents, journals, everything I needed to understand my situation fully. A tense silence filled the room. Jeffrey sipped his coffee, clearly processing this information and its implications. I have been worried about you, he said finally, attempting to redirect the conversation. This place was supposed to help you heal, give you peace and quiet. Is that what it was supposed to do? Because it seemed more like exile. No transportation, no communication, no support. You are exaggerating. I provided the basics. The basics? I set my mug down carefully. I nearly died here, Jeffrey. I sprained my ankle walking miles for supplies. I almost froze during power outages. I rationed food because I had no way to get more. That goes well beyond neglect into abandonment. Jeffrey's face hardened. I was trying to help you become more self-sufficient. You were falling apart in Boston, talking to Mom's photos, refusing to move forward. By dumping me in an isolated house with no car, phone, or internet? That was not helping. That was disposing of an inconvenient parent. That is not fair. Jeffrey stood abruptly. I have my own life, my own family to worry about. I cannot be responsible for your happiness. No one asked you to be. Basic human decency would have been sufficient. Another tense silence fell. Jeffrey walked to the window, staring out at the thriving garden plots. The property looks better than I expected, he said finally. In fact, it might be the right time to consider selling. The real estate market is strong, and with the improvements you have made, I almost laughed at the transparency of his motivation. Is that why you are really here? To convince me to sell the estate? It makes financial sense, Jeffrey insisted. This place is too big for one person. The proceeds could support you in a nice retirement community closer to us. Somewhere with people your own age. Activities, medical care on site. Closer to you? You have not visited me in 6 months. That would change if you were more conveniently located. I took a deep breath. Jeffrey, there is something you need to understand. This estate is not available for sale. Of course, Island Grandpa left it to both of us. As co-owner, I have every right to initiate a sale, and frankly, I need the liquidity right now. The moment had arrived. Actually, that is not correct. Your mother and I transferred the property solely into my name 3 years ago. I have the deed in the safe upstairs. Jeffrey's face flushed dark red. That is impossible. You are confused. I am not confused. Richard Stanley handled the legal work, the same attorney who helped us discover your unauthorized access to our retirement accounts. Jeffrey went very still. What are you talking about? Your mother knew, Jeffrey. She discovered the forged documents, the unauthorized withdrawals, the loans taken against our assets. She documented everything. That is ridiculous. You do not know what you are saying. But his eyes darted nervously around the room, not meeting mine. The gambling debts, the failed investments, the money borrowed against properties we did not even know you had access to. Martha tracked it all, protected what she could, and made sure I would have this information when I needed it. Jeffrey's face cycled through emotions. Shock, anger, fear. Then, most disturbingly, calculation. He visibly composed himself, adopting a concerned expression. "Dad, I think you may be having some cognitive issues. Paranoid delusions are common with grief and isolation. Let me take you to see a doctor." The attempt at gaslighting might have worked months ago when I was at my lowest point. Now it only strengthened my resolve. Miss Reynolds at Blackwell Legal has copies of all the documentation. She has already secured court orders freezing the remaining assets you might try to access. If you would like to discuss this with her, I would be happy to arrange a meeting. Jeffrey's facade cracked. You had no right to go through private financial matters. Just as you had no right to forge my signature or steal from your parents. I did not steal. I borrowed with every intention of paying it back when my investments matured. Did those investments ever mature, Jeffrey? Or were they just more gambling losses disguised as business opportunities? His silence was answer enough. How much do you owe? I asked more gently. Maybe we can find a solution that does not involve selling the only secure housing I have. Jeffrey slumped into a chair, suddenly looking much older. About $300,000. The investment group is threatening legal action if I do not pay by the end of the month. The amount staggered me, but I kept my expression neutral. These would be the same investment partners you were working with 3 years ago, when your mother first discovered the problems. He nodded miserably. The ones she and I both told you were running a Ponzi scheme? Another nod. So you not only continued gambling with borrowed money after promising to stop, but you did it with the same people we specifically warned you were fraudulent. I thought I could get ahead of it this time, Jeffrey mumbled. They promised returns of 20%. I sighed deeply. The anger I had nurtured for months was giving way to something more complex. This broken man before me was still my son, Martha's child, despite his terrible choices. Jeffrey, I cannot sell this property. Not only because it is my home now, but because I have plans for it that honor your mother's memory. What I can offer is this. I will not pursue legal action regarding the funds you took previously, provided you agree to financial counseling and addiction treatment. His head snapped up. I am not an addict. The behavior suggests otherwise. Continued risky financial decisions despite negative consequences is a hallmark of addiction. Jeffrey stared at me for a long moment, then deflated. What about the money I owe now? They are not people you can negotiate with, Dad. I suspect they are not legitimate investors at all, but that is a separate issue. I will contact Miss Reynolds about the possibility of filing fraud charges against them. In the meantime, you need to declare bankruptcy and get professional help. Bankruptcy would ruin me professionally, Jeffrey protested. Perhaps. But continuing on your current path will ruin you completely. The choice is yours. We talked for hours more. Painful, honest conversation that should have happened years ago. Jeffrey revealed the full extent of his financial misdeeds and the gambling addiction that drove them. I shared my experience of abandonment at the estate and the emotional journey of discovering Martha's preparations. By evening, we had reached a fragile understanding. Jeffrey would seek professional help for his gambling addiction. I would help him navigate bankruptcy proceedings rather than selling the estate. Our relationship would need to be rebuilt slowly, on new foundations of honesty and boundaries. As Jeffrey prepared to leave, he paused at the door. I really did think this place would be good for you. That was not entirely a lie. Perhaps you were right, just not in the way you intended, I replied. This place has become my sanctuary and purpose. Your mother understood that potential, even when neither of us did. Jeffrey nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. She always was the smartest one in the family. On that we can agree. I watched his SUV disappear down the driveway, uncertain when or if I would see my son again. The confrontation had been necessary but exhausting. Yet I felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of unspoken truths and festering resentment. Whatever happened with Jeffrey going forward, I had reclaimed my narrative. No longer a victim of abandonment, I was the architect of my own future. Martha had given me the tools. The rest was up to me. 6 months after the confrontation with Jeffrey, the Barnes estate had transformed into a thriving homestead. The summer garden produced abundant vegetables, following Martha's detailed planting schedules. The greenhouse extended the growing season into fall. Solar panels generated excess electricity that I sold back to the grid. The old Victorian house, once a symbol of my abandonment, now stood proud and welcoming against the autumn landscape. But the physical transformation paled in comparison to the community I had built. What began as casual conversations over the ham radio evolved into a robust support network of seniors and veterans within a 50-mile radius. Alan remained my closest friend and most frequent visitor, but others had joined our circle. Doris, the retired nurse, started volunteering her skills once a month, offering basic health checks for elderly residents in the area who struggled to reach medical facilities. Walter, the ex-forest ranger, led nature walks on the property, teaching identification of edible and medicinal plants. Tom from the general store connected me with local farmers, creating an informal co-op for exchanging goods and services. Most significantly, the vision of turning part of the estate into a retreat center was becoming reality. With Alan's connections to veterans organizations and my newfound purpose, we secured a small grant to convert the carriage house into a meeting space. Local craftspeople, many of them veterans themselves, volunteered labor in exchange for future use of the facilities. By October, we hosted our first weekend retreat for 5 elderly widowers struggling with isolation and grief. The program combined practical skills for independent living with therapeutic activities and social connection. The success of that initial gathering led to monthly events, each tailored to different needs in our community. "Martha would be so proud of what you have created here," Alan commented one evening as we sat on the porch watching sunset paint the autumn foliage in brilliant hues. "You have turned personal tragedy into community treasure." "I could not have done it without her guidance," I replied. "Sometimes I still find her notes tucked into unexpected places. Last week I found gardening instructions for fall planting inside an old cookbook. It is like she is still teaching me, still helping me grow." My relationship with Jeffrey evolved slowly during this period. After the confrontation, he had indeed sought treatment for gambling addiction, joining a 12-step program and working with a financial counselor. Bankruptcy proceedings were painful but necessary, forcing him to confront the full consequences of his actions. Our communication began with cautious phone calls, progressed to video chats, and eventually, in early fall, another in-person visit. This time, Jeffrey brought his wife, Amanda, who seemed genuinely surprised by the positive changes in both the property and in me. "This place is amazing, Lonnie," she said, using my first name for the first time in our 20-year relationship. "Jeffrey told me about the retreats you are hosting. What a wonderful way to honor Martha." Jeffrey remained subdued during the visit, still carrying the weight of shame for his past behavior. But I noticed positive changes in him too. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions about my life and activities with what seemed like genuine interest. He helped with property maintenance tasks without complaint. On their second day, while Amanda was exploring the gardens with Alan, Jeffrey and I sat in the study surrounded by Martha's journals and photographs. "I still cannot believe Mom knew about the gambling all along," he said quietly. "She never confronted me directly, not after that first time. Your mother understood addiction," I explained. "Her brother struggled with alcoholism for decades. She recognized that confrontation often drives the behavior underground rather than stopping it. So, she prepared for the worst instead. She prepared for reality. There is a difference." I showed him one of Martha's later journals. "She never stopped hoping you would find your way back to health. She just made sure I would be protected while you figured things out." Jeffrey blinked back tears. I did not deserve her faith. None of us do, really. That is what makes love like hers so precious. It sees our failings but believes in our capacity to overcome them. Our relationship remained fragile, built on new foundations of honesty and appropriate boundaries. I made it clear that while the estate would eventually pass to him after my death, financial protections were in place to prevent its sale or use as collateral. Jeffrey accepted these terms with a humility that suggested genuine change. By Thanksgiving, The transformation of the estate into a community resource was well underway. The main floor of the house remained my private residence, but the second floor had been converted into 4 guest rooms for retreat participants. The carriage house renovation was complete, featuring a commercial kitchen, meeting space, and activity areas. Our Thanksgiving retreat hosted 12 participants, a mixture of elderly widows and widowers and 3 veterans struggling with reintegration to civilian life. Together, we prepared a traditional feast, each person contributing a dish and sharing the story behind it. We ate at tables set up in the carriage house, which we had decorated with autumn leaves and handmade centerpieces. Jeffrey and Amanda joined us for the meal, bringing their teenage children who I had rarely seen in recent years. Watching my grandchildren interact respectfully with the elderly guests, helping serve food and listening to veterans' stories, gave me hope that the legacy of compassion Martha had nurtured might continue through generations. As winter approached again, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From the depths of grief and abandonment to the creation of a purposeful new chapter, from isolation to community, from betrayal to cautious reconciliation. One snowy December evening, I sat in the study with Martha's photo beside me. No longer a desperate conversation with absence, but a gentle acknowledgement of continued connection. "You saw the possibility in this place when no one else did," I told her image. "You knew it could be a sanctuary not just for me, but for others. You understood that healing happens in community, not in isolation." The first anniversary of my arrival at the estate arrived with a snowstorm that reminded me of those desperate early days. But this time, the house was warm and well insulated. The pantry was stocked with preserved garden produce. The generator hummed efficiently during brief power outages. Most importantly, I was surrounded by friends who checked in regularly by radio and phone, neighbors who stopped by to ensure I had everything I needed. On that anniversary, I wrote my own entry in a journal I had started keeping, inspired by Martha's example. The greatest wisdom I have learned this year is that life never stops offering new beginnings, even when we think all possibilities have ended. What appeared to be abandonment became the pathway to purpose. What seemed like exile became the foundation for community. What felt like an ending was actually a doorway to a different future than I had imagined, but one filled with meaning and connection. Martha understood what I could not see through my grief. That resilience is not about avoiding hardship, but about finding the courage to create something new from what remains. That love continues to guide and sustain us, even when its physical presence is gone. That the human capacity for renewal is our greatest gift and most profound responsibility. I do not know how many years I have left on this earth, but I know now how I want to spend them, creating space for others to heal as I have healed, building community where isolation threatened to destroy, honoring Martha's legacy by extending the sanctuary she created to those who need it most. This old house on this ancient land has become more than property. It is a living testament to the power of foresight, forgiveness, and faith in human potential. The journey continues, and for the first time since Martha's death, I look to the future with hope rather than dread. As I close this chapter of my story, I want to ask you, my friends watching this video, what unexpected blessings have you discovered in your most difficult challenges? Have you ever found purpose in what initially seemed like abandonment or loss? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey from isolation to community, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that even our darkest moments can become doorways to new beginnings. Thank you for joining me on this path. And remember that none of us walk alone, even when the road ahead seems empty. There is always the possibility of connection waiting to be discovered, just like I found behind that locked closet door.